Just as a reminder, whilst these shapes appear different on the keyboard, the spacing between the notes is identical even though the chords look like a different shape. If you count the amount of half steps between these chords, you'll see what I mean. That's why they're the same type of chord. They use the same intervals, and to learn more about that and to approach building chords, check out my previous video linked in the description below. The spacing between the root and the middle note for a major chord when in root position is 4 half steps. It's probably quicker to see that by jumping 2 whole steps. So if you're in doubt when you're about to play one of these, you can check that. We call that note in the middle the major third. The one that sometimes gets people here is E major, because in the head people are thinking, oh, there's a black key in the middle. They sometimes either do that or that by accident. So a useful thing is, before you even think about the exact notes, just keep a sketch of the shape of the chord in your mind. So all of these chords, whilst not perfectly even, they are kind of roughly symmetrical. So when you play an E major, that's pretty much in the middle, that note. This now is a much more of a lopsided shape. We've got 2 notes squished together here and a big gap there, and the same the other way around if you play that note. So remember, it's kind of symmetrical. As well as learning theory and stuff, playing piano is a very tactile thing. We've got to get used to the visual side and the feel of these shapes. The next group is the 3 major chords that go black, white, black. So it's kind of like an upside down triangle shape, and that's D flat major, or it might be called C sharp major sometimes, E flat major, might be called D sharp major other times, and A flat major, which might possibly be called G sharp major as well. If we just use those flat names a sec, if we think about those last 2 groups, D, E and A major were like that, white, black, white. D flat, E flat and A flat major were the other way around, black, white, black. And the last group then is 3 chords that all have unique shapes. This is the only major chord that only has black notes in it. So we could either call that G flat major or F sharp major. If we call it G major, imagine a G being flattened like that. If we call it F sharp major, imagine an F being sharpened. And then the last 2 are B flat major and B major. Now these go opposite. So B major is white, black, black. And B flat major is black, white, white. And again, remember, they look different, but the spacing between the notes is identical. And here's another handy tip that works for both the major and minor chords. The outside notes of these chords when they're in root position is always a perfect fifth, which is 3.5 whole steps away. But the handy thing about perfect fifths is, apart from when we start on B flat and B, they're always matching colours. So if you get used to the feel of that distance and how that looks and how that feels under your fingers, that's a really helpful thing to give you the framework for the outside of these chords. And this is helpful when we get to minor chords as well. So a fifth of all the white notes is this distance, like this. You can see it's the same distance of white notes each time. And when you practice this a bit, that a sixth just feels too big, and the one before it, a fourth, feels too small. Black notes. So these are all fifths here, like this. And then we've just got to remember to watch out for these opposite coloured places when we start from B or B flat. Once you have a major chord memorised, you can then adjust the pattern, like I'm about to show you, to turn it into a minor chord. You don't need to start learning all 12 major chords before starting on the minors. In fact, you'll probably find learning both types starting from the white keys more useful and more common as a beginner. When we're playing these in root position, like this, all we're going to do to turn this into a minor chord is lower that middle note by a half step. Now the middle note is only 3 half steps, or 1.5 whole steps from the root, but remember the outside notes are the same. The note we had before in the major chord, we'd call that a major third, and now the one we've moved it to is now called the minor third. So C major, F major and G major then turn into the triangle shapes with the black key in the middle. C major becomes C minor, F major becomes F minor, G major becomes G minor. The 3 major chords that had a black key in the middle, when you turn them into minor chords, they all become white notes. So D major, move that a half step down, moves to a white note, becomes D minor. E major becomes A minor, move that down a half step, and A major becomes A minor. So in those 2 groups, they all kind of switch around. If we look at the next group, turning D flat major into minor, we've got another white note in the middle here. That's because when we move that down a half step, there's no black key in between, so we still get the same kind of looking shape. And that's going to happen again with A flat major. Moving that note down there, we get this because there's no black key in the middle there. You might encounter some funny spellings here, whether you call it A flat or G sharp. We're not going to focus on the spellings at the moment. I have got a video up on how to spell chords and scales as well. You can major, so we still get the same kind of looking shape. And that's going to happen again with A flat major. Moving that note down there, we get this because there's no black key in the middle there. You might encounter some funny spellings here, whether you call it A flat or G sharp. We're not going to focus on the spellings at the moment. I have got a video up on how to spell chords and scales as well. You can check out. We're kind of primarily focusing on just visualizing the notes at the sec. If we look at E flat minor though, well, when we had E flat major, if we lower that by a half step now, this time we actually get a black key in the middle, and this happens to be the only minor chord that only has black notes in it, E flat or D sharp minor. And the last group then, G flat major, goes from all black keys to black, white, black. If we put that third down a half step. B flat minor looks like this if we convert major, put the third down a half step. And B major was like this if we convert that to minor and move the third down a half step. So we've got a couple of random shapes again then. But like I said, if you just work on memorizing the major chords, then that one trick to changing to minor, when you get good at seeing that pattern shift quickly, it automatically gives you 12 more chords without having to actually memorize 12 more individual things. And the good thing is you can extend that to when you learn different kinds of chords too. Every new pattern you learn gives you 12 new chords, and it limits the amount of things you have to memorize. So practicing these on your own then, I would suggest to start off by doing one group at a time, and you could even just start with literally just going up and down, moving through the chords up and down like that. Do that at your own pace, try and get a little bit quicker for a change, maybe put a metronome on to try and force yourself to find the next one quicker, or you could even put a drum track on. You could get creative and come up with some kind of rhythm pattern to make it more interesting. Try breaking the notes up too, and then maybe try this in the next group as well, D, E and A. Again, try the same tactics, come up with a rhythm, force yourself to do it quicker, and then do that through each of the groups. Then try mixing groups together. You could perhaps do the white notes and then the triangle shapes, mix the triangle shapes with the upside down triangle shapes, mix and match to try and challenge yourself. Focus more on any weaker groups or weaker specific chords, and eventually try and go through all of them. And here's a couple of tactics when you're doing basically anything, when you're trying to hit all 12 keys. A good way to do it is to move up in half steps. So start from C, start from D flat, start from D. So you go C major, D flat major, D major, E flat major, E major, and so on. And then you could repeat that with minor chords. And this one's really good because it really gets you used to how those shapes morph depending on where you start. So as you're doing that, basically each note that you're playing moves up by the same amount. And you imagine if something moves up by the same amount, the spacing between the things that you move is going to stay the same. And when the spacing is the same, that means it's the same type of chord. A couple of other ways to hit every key is to move around something called the circle of fifths. If we move a chord up a fifth each time, it's actually going to end up hitting all 12 keys and come back round to the beginning. To save constantly getting higher and higher or running off the edge, you can just change the octave. So if you look at the circle of fifths, I'll put that up on the screen. It would be C, and then G, and then D, and then A, and then E, and then B, and so on. You could do that backwards as well, which is actually moving around in fourths. We sometimes call that the circle of fourths too. Or you could try doing the chords from just the white notes and then just the black notes. So C major, D major, E major, F, G, A, B, and then the same from the black keys. And lastly, one more thing you could try doing major and then minor. So C major, C minor, D major, D minor, E major, E minor, and so on. Just little things to challenge yourself to find these shapes quickly. You don't have to do this for ages, and occasionally if you're ever using these chords when you're actually playing music and you find yourself stuttering over when you're using them, perhaps it's time to take a quick 5 minutes a few times in a week for a little bit, just to brush up on your fundamentals.
coffee, and I'm ready for an intense 30-minute piano lesson looking at piano chords from the very, very beginning. In real time. Hey, what's up guys? Joseph Sikora here from Creative Piano Academy, and today, yes, we're looking at piano chords.
When you play anything in different keys, shapes all change and can become quite difficult to see. I think that is one of the challenges of learning piano. So every time you learn a new kind of chord then, there's 12 versions of it to learn in all the 12 different keys, and the shape is going to keep morphing. As a beginner, this can get overwhelming, and that's before you even get to inversions and other ways that you can play those chords. So my trick how to memorize chords on piano is actually not really to memorize them. Instead, you just learn one new pattern for each new kind of chord, and that pattern acts as a blueprint you can use for piano chords in all 12 keys, meaning 12 times less things to learn. I'm going to show you my method for learning new blueprints in the easiest way, and exactly how that works with a few different chord types in different keys. So the thing we're working on here is seeing patterns quickly and being able to change them. This skill will absolutely skyrocket how much you're able to learn and memorize music in the long run. And the clearer you can see things on the keyboard, the more you can focus on your technique, getting your hand in place and actually playing. You can read better if that's what you're doing, and you can understand more about the music you're playing and how it's working, making you a better musician. So what I recommend is, instead of starting a completely new pattern each time you learn a new chord, learn to just adjust major chords. This is easier because the adjustments are then smaller, as in go over smaller distances on the piano and are easier to find. Keep watching and you'll see exactly what I mean. It's obviously best to get all 12 major chords confident first. They're the most common anyway, so that's well worth doing. And learning just one lot of 12 things is pretty manageable. So let's take a C major chord as a first example, and I'll do some other keys in a minute. We'll change it to 4 chord types, but you can apply the method to any other new chord type you learn. So this C is our framework. The intervals that build it are a root, a major third, and a perfect fifth. We're focusing on the visual aspect of finding these chords here really, but knowing how to label the notes does help too. You can watch this video on music intervals if you're not sure, and I've got a worksheet on those too, all linked in the description again. The first kind of chord we're going to change it to is just a minor chord. So all we do is lower the third by 1 half step, or semitone as we say in the UK. That's the middle note when we play the chord in root position. So from here to here. This new one's called a minor third. We've changed an interval, so we've changed one of the flavors in the chord. We have a new combination of intervals, which equals a new chord. Back to major, we'll do a diminished chord next. So for this one, we take 3 and 5 and lower them by a half step, giving us root again, obviously, a minor third, and now a flat 5 or diminished fifth. So just the third down for minor, the third and the fifth for diminished. So next, a sus 4 chord. Sus is just short for suspended. So from major again, we take the third, but this time we raise it a half step, giving us the fourth. We'll do one more chord type, this time an example adding a note on. This is a dominant 7th chord, often just called 7, making this chord a C7. We'll keep the major framework, but add on the minor 7th, or the flat 7. And all you do for that is come down a whole step from the octave. So here's the octave, because we started on C, half step, whole step. Now we have a 4-note chord. You can also find that by stacking a minor third from the 5th, but I find it quicker the other way. So when we take those through different keys, we have to remember that some of those half step or whole step movements are going to look a bit different. So some of the half steps are white-black, some are black to white, and here, where there's no black note in between the notes, they're both white. Some whole steps are either both white, like here or here. Some are black, like here. Or in these areas again, to watch out for, they're going to be opposite colours. So black, white, black. So let's take those same chord types and do them in 2 other keys. Let's do them in A first. So we've got our A major chord, root, third, fifth. Lower the third for minor. Back to major. Lower the third and the fifth for diminished. Back to major. Raise the third for sus4. Back down to major. add on the minor 7, which was a whole step down from the octave. Let's do one more example in a shape that looks different. So here's a B flat major chord. Lower the 3rd for minor. Back to major. Lower the 3rd and the 5th for diminished. Back to major. Raise the 3rd for sus4. Back to major. Add on the flat 7 for our 7 chord. There's the octave, down a whole step. And don't forget, you can apply that method to any other chord type that you learn. I also decided to make another worksheet you can have as a reference for loads of other common 3 and 4 note chord types you'll start coming across. How to build them and how to find them using this major framework trick. I hope that trick helps you see things a bit clearer on the keyboard. Please let me know in the comments if it did. Remember, it won't work instantly, it still needs practice though, like everything. So to do that, you could pick one chord type and take it around all 12 keys in order, like going up in half steps or maybe around the circle of fifths. You should also test yourself finding random ones too, or you can take one key at a time and keep changing the chord type like I did then. Please give the video a like if you got something out of it, and subscribe for more content that's going to help you develop your piano playing. Hit the notification bell too so YouTube actually tells you when there's a new video out. I recommend you check out this video next if you want to learn a few more things that you can work on to become a better musician, or this one for some fun exercises and improv with backing tracks. Thanks for watching.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Aaron Petit Piano Tutorials. I apologize for being gone from this channel for so long. I ended up moving 3 times in the last year and was never in an environment where I could record tutorials and practice videos and that sort of thing. So now that I'm in my own place now, I should be able to do uploads about once a month with new tutorials, maybe more often if I have some extra time. So the first video I'd like to do, coming back, is something about memory and the importance of memorization of your pieces from the very start of learning them. This principle I'll be addressing is actually so unanimous and can work for almost any instrument, just because it's not specifically a piano technique, but I'm going to be demonstrating with a piano piece because that's my instrument that I can work on. So the idea behind it is to create a kind of a balance of how many times you're looking at the score and playing something, and then how many times you're playing it by memory without looking. So you kind of go back and forth until it evens out and you can recall the visual memory of the score, what it looks like, and also the physical memory of the score, like when you're not looking. So it's basically that you go back and forth, but what you do is you change the number of times you play it by memory after each time you look. So I call this technique the 1-1-1-2-1-3 technique. And here's just a little actual diagram of how this works. So the black numbers are how many times you're looking at the actual score and playing it. And the red numbers are how many times you're repeating it by memory. And you go from left to right here. So you play it once looking, then once by memory, then once looking, then twice by memory, then once looking, and 3 times by memory, and finally one more time looking to sort of solidify it, and then you move on to another part. And so by the time you've gone through that whole process, if you add it all up, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, you've actually played it 10 times, and about half of
Welcome to virtualsheetmusic.com. I'm Robert Estrain with a technique video, advanced memorization techniques. You know,